Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Architect of Dreams. Wade Stewart stood on the marble terrace of his Malibu mansion, watching the Pacific waves crash against the private beach below. At 52, he had built an empire from nothing. Stewart Industries now owned 17 luxury hotels across 3 continents. His calloused hands, scarred from his early days in construction, gripped a crystal tumbler of 30-year-old scotch. 25 years ago, Wade had been a broke college dropout working double shifts at a construction site. That's where he met Vicki Hendricks, a secretary at the contracting company's main office. She was beautiful, ambitious, and everything Wade thought he wanted. Vicki came from old money. Her family owned textile mills in North Carolina, but she claimed to love Wade's raw determination and blue-collar authenticity. Their daughter, Christina Stewart, was born 2 years after their wedding. Wade poured everything into building his empire, working 18-hour days, missing birthdays and school plays, also his girls would never want for anything. Vicki seemed supportive, playing the perfect corporate wife, hosting charity galas, and maintaining their social image. But Wade had always been observant. In recent months, Vicki had become distant, taking weekend trips with friends, staying late at her art gallery that barely turned a profit. Phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered rooms. New jewelry, she claimed, came from vintage estate sales. Christina, now 26 and supposedly working at a nonprofit in San Francisco, had grown cold toward him over the past year. Their weekly calls became monthly, then stopped altogether. She'd graduated from Stanford with Wade's money, yet seemed to resent everything he'd provided. Tonight was different, though. Wade had made a decision that would change everything. He'd installed discreet surveillance equipment throughout the house 3 weeks ago. Not from paranoia, but from strategic thinking. In business, you gathered intelligence before making moves. Wade treated his personal life the same way. The front door opened below. Vicki's laughter echoed through the foyer, followed by a man's voice Wade didn't recognize. They thought he was in Singapore for a hotel acquisition. He deliberately let that information slip during dinner last week, even showing her the fake itinerary his assistant had prepared. Wade moved silently to his home office, activating the hidden camera feeds on his computer. The screens flickered to life, showing Vicki in the living room with a man Wade had never seen. Tall, well-dressed, probably mid-40s. They were intimate, comfortable with each other in a way that spoke of long familiarity. "Are you sure he's really in Singapore?" the man asked, his hands already exploring Vicki's body. "Seth, darling, I told you." His assistant confirmed the flight. "Wade's so predictable. Work, work, work. He'll be gone for 10 days. Vicki's voice carried the contempt Wade had suspected but never heard so clearly. Seth. Wade memorized the name, the face, every detail. This wasn't a new affair. Their body language suggested months, maybe years of intimacy. And Christina's wedding is set for Saturday. Seth continued. Wade's blood froze. Wedding? Yes, and Wade still doesn't know. Christina and I decided he doesn't deserve to be there. After all those years of neglect, missing every important moment for his precious hotels. This is our revenge. Our perfect family moment without the workaholic father who was never really present anyway. Seth laughed. I love how your daughter thinks. She gets her devious streak from you. Christina understands that Wade is just a provider, not a father. She knows her real family now. Vicki's words cut like surgical instruments, precise and designed to inflict maximum damage. Wade watched for another hour as they discussed details, the wedding venue, the guest list that deliberately excluded him, how they'd been planning this betrayal for months. His daughter's fiancé was apparently someone from Seth's social circle, another detail Wade had been kept ignorant of. By midnight, after Seth left and Vicki went to bed, Wade had compiled a complete dossier. Seth Riley, investment banker, divorced, 2 children he rarely saw. 44 years old, lived in a penthouse downtown that Wade's research showed was leveraged to the hilt. More importantly, Seth had been embezzling from his clients' accounts, something Wade's forensic accountant had uncovered within 3 hours of being given Seth's financial records. But Wade wasn't interested in simple exposure. That was amateur hour. This betrayal required something more profound, more permanent. His wife and daughter thought they were dealing with a predictable workaholic who could be easily dismissed. They had no idea they just declared war on someone who'd built a billion-dollar empire through strategic thinking and ruthless execution. Wade opened his laptop and began making calls. His contacts around the world, lawyers, private investigators, government officials who owed him favors, would be instrumental in what came next. By dawn, he had the framework of a plan that would destroy both Seth and Vicky systematically, while teaching his daughter the most expensive lesson of her life. The construction worker who'd clawed his way from poverty to power was about to show them why he'd never lost a fight that mattered. Chapter 2. The Web Titans. 3 days later, Wade returned from his fake Singapore trip to find Vicky playing the loving wife, asking about his meetings and expressing concern about his fatigue. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, tender touches, interested questions, even suggestions for a romantic weekend getaway. How was the Meridian acquisition? She asked over breakfast, pouring his coffee with practiced perfection. Challenging, but successful. The Singapore team exceeded expectations. Wade had actually spent those 3 days in a downtown hotel, coordinating his investigation and setting the first phases of his plan in motion. Christina called that evening, the first time in 2 months. "Hi, Dad. I know I've been terrible about staying in touch." Her voice carried forced warmth. "I've been meaning to call you. It's good to hear from you, sweetheart. How's work?" "Actually, Dad, I have some news. I'm engaged." Wade's grip tightened on the phone. "Engaged? That's wonderful. When did this happen?" "Recently. His name is Orlando Dotson. He's amazing, Dad. You'd love him." The lies flowed so easily. Wade had already learned that Orlando was Seth's cousin, a trust fund addict with gambling debts exceeding $2 million. "I'd love to meet him. When can you bring him home?" A pause. "Well, actually, we're thinking of having a small ceremony. Just close family and friends. Nothing elaborate. Of course. When are you thinking?" Another pause, longer this time. "This Saturday, actually. I know it's short notice, but we found this perfect venue and—" "This Saturday?" "Christina, that's impossible. I have the Jakarta opening on Monday. The entire board will be there." "Understand, Dad. Work comes first, right? It always has." Her voice shifted, becoming colder. "Mom said you'd probably be too busy." The accusation hung in the air. Wade realized this was the test. Would he choose family or business? They designed it perfectly, knowing his reputation for never missing major corporate events. "Sweetheart, if this is important to you, don't worry about it, Dad. We'll take lots of pictures. You can see them when you have time." The line went dead. Wade stared at the phone, marveling at the sophisticated cruelty of the setup. They deliberately scheduled the wedding during his Jakarta opening, then used his choice to justify excluding him. It was psychological warfare disguised as family dynamics. Vicky appeared in the doorway. How? What did Christina sound? Distant. She mentioned some wedding this weekend, but it conflicts with Jakarta. Vicky's expression shifted through a series of micro-emotions. Surprise that Christina had called at all. Concern about what she'd revealed. Calculation about how to manage the situation. "Oh, that. Yes, she mentioned something about that. I think she understands how important Jakarta is for you." Her tone was supportive, understanding, the perfect wife backing her husband's career priorities. Wade nodded slowly. "I suppose you're right. The Jakarta opening is crucial. I could attend for both of us," Vicky offered. "Take pictures, represent the family." "That's very thoughtful. Thank you." That night, Wade watched the hidden camera feeds as Vicky called both Seth and Christina, reassuring them that the plan was working perfectly. Wade was choosing work over family, just as predicted. They could proceed with their perfect wedding, free from a man who'd funded every aspect of their privileged lives. But Wade was already 3 steps ahead. His private investigator had discovered that Orlando Dotson's gambling debts weren't just large. They were owed to very dangerous people. The wedding venue was booked under Vicky's name, with payment coming from accounts she'd been secretly skimming from the household expenses. Most interesting of all, Seth had recently taken out a massive life insurance policy on himself, with Vicky as the primary beneficiary. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't just about excluding Wade from a wedding. It was about replacing him entirely. Vicky and Seth had been planning for Wade's complete removal from their lives, with Christina serving as their willing accomplice. Wade opened his secure phone and sent a single text message to his head of security. Initiate Protocol 7. Full surveillance on all targets. Prepare for comprehensive implementation. Protocol 7 was something Wade had developed during a hostile takeover attempt 5 years earlier. It involved complete intelligence gathering, strategic asset positioning, and coordinated pressure points designed to systematically dismantle an opponent's entire life structure. His wife and daughter thought they were playing checkers. Wade was about to teach them chess. By Friday evening, all the pieces were in position. Wade's team had infiltrated the wedding venue, the guest list, and even Orlando's bachelor party. Seth's financial crimes had been documented with prosecutorial precision. Vicky's secret accounts had been identified and were ready to be frozen at a moment's notice. The wedding gift Wade was preparing would be more than just revenge. It would be a masterclass in strategic destruction. Chapter 3. The Call That Changes Everything. Saturday morning arrived gray and overcast. Wade sat in his home office, watching the live feeds his security team had established at the wedding venue. Crystal Springs Country Club, a venue he'd actually helped finance through one of his subsidiary companies, though the current management didn't know their ultimate benefactor was watching every preparation. The irony wasn't lost on him. His own money was paying for the celebration of his exclusion. At 11 a.m., his phone rang. Christina's name appeared on the screen. When I called to ask when the wedding was, my daughter said, "We already got married, Dad. And I only invited people who really matter. Just send the $2 million mansion keys and stop being so pathetic." Wade's fingers tightened around the phone as Christina's voice dripped with calculated cruelty. The wedding hadn't even happened yet. She was calling him before the ceremony to deliver this psychological blow. "Dad, in case you were wondering, the wedding was beautiful. We already finished the ceremony." Her voice carried triumphant malice. "Mom and I decided to only invite people who really matter to us. People who were actually present in our lives." Wade remained silent, letting her continue. "Since you missed it anyway, surprise. Maybe you could just courier over the keys to the Malibu house. Mom mentioned you always planned to give it to me eventually. Consider it a wedding gift. And Dad, stop being so pathetic about work being more important than family. We all know where your priorities are." The line went dead. Wade stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down with careful precision. Through his computer screen, he could see the wedding was still in preparation phase. Christina had lied about the ceremony being over, adding insult to the already devastating injury. But something else struck him. The demand for the house keys wasn't spontaneous. It was coordinated. They'd planned this psychological attack to coincide with a property grab. The Malibu mansion was worth $12 million, free and clear. They weren't just excluding him. They were robbing him. Wade smiled for the first time in days. They'd just made a critical error. He opened his secure laptop and accessed the legal documents he'd prepared over the past week. With a few keystrokes, he initiated the final phase of Protocol 7. Within minutes, several things happened simultaneously. The wedding venue received an emergency health department inspection, triggered by an anonymous complaint about potential food safety violations. The inspection would delay the ceremony by at least 3 hours. Orlando Dotson's gambling creditors received detailed information about his upcoming marriage to an heiress, along with the wedding venue and time. These particular creditors were known for their aggressive collection methods and poor timing. Seth Riley's investment firm received a flash audit notice from the Securities and Exchange Commission, triggered by meticulously documented evidence of client fund manipulation. SEC agents were already en route to his office. Vicky's secret bank accounts were frozen pending investigation into potential money laundering activities, a legitimate concern given the suspicious transaction patterns Wade's forensic accountants had documented. Most importantly, the Malibu mansion's deed was transferred into an irrevocable trust, with Christina specifically excluded as a beneficiary due to demonstrated financial irresponsibility and hostile intent toward the grander. But these were just the opening moves. Wade's real wedding gift was still being prepared. At 2 p.m., Wade's phone rang again. This time it was Orlando, and he was screaming. "Mr. Stewart, sir, I need your help. These men showed up at the wedding, and they're saying I owe them money, and they're going to hurt Christina if I don't pay, and the SEC just arrested my cousin Seth." And Wade hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Christina this time, sobbing. "Dad, I don't know what's happening. There are these scary men here, and they're saying Orlando owes them $2 million, and Mom's bank accounts are frozen, and Seth got arrested, and..." Wade hung up again. Then Vicky called. "Wade, thank God. Something terrible is happening. The police are here, and these criminals are threatening Christina, and I can't access my accounts, and..." "The wedding gift," Wade said quietly. "What?" "I promised to leave a wedding gift. I delivered it personally." The silence stretched for 15 seconds. "Wade, what did you do?" "I gave Christina exactly what she asked for. Consequences that really matter. From someone who was actually present in her life, just not in the way she expected. You can't do this to your own daughter." "I'm not doing anything to my daughter. I'm simply allowing her choices to have their natural consequences. She wanted independence from her pathetic father. She has it." Wade ended the call and turned off his phone. On his computer screen, he watched the chaos unfolding at Crystal Springs Country Club. Police cars, SEC agents, dangerous-looking men in expensive suits, wedding guests fleeing in confusion. The phone in his office began ringing. The landline they'd somehow gotten the number for. It rang 17 times before stopping. Then it started again. Wade walked to his safe and removed a leather portfolio. Inside were copies of every document, every piece of evidence, every strategic move he'd orchestrated. At the back was a single photograph, Christina at age 7, sitting on his shoulders at Disneyland, both of them laughing. He set the photograph aside and fed the rest of the portfolio into his paper shredder. The landline showed 78 missed calls by evening. Wade never answered a single one. Chapter 4, Unraveling Threads. Monday morning brought a steady rain that matched the storm Wade had unleashed. He sat in his downtown office, 40 floors above the city, reviewing reports from his various operatives. The wedding that never happened had created a cascade of consequences that were still multiplying. His assistant, Marlene Clifford, knocked and entered with a stack of messages. Marlene was 62, had worked for Wade for 15 years, and possessed the rare ability to be completely unflappable under pressure. "Sir, your wife has called 37 times since Friday. Your daughter 41 times. There are also calls from Orlando Dodson, several attorneys, and someone claiming to be from the district attorney's office." Wade didn't look up from his reports. "What's the status on the Jakarta opening?" "Successful. The board was impressed by your presentation via video conference. The hotel is already showing strong booking numbers." "Good. And the other matters?" Marlene consulted her notes with professional efficiency. Seth Riley was formally charged with securities fraud this morning. Bail was set at $5 million. Orlando Dodson is currently in protective custody after the gambling creditors made specific threats against him and anyone associated with him. Mrs. Stewart's accounts remain frozen pending the money laundering investigation. Wade finally looked up. "And Christina?" "She's staying at the Westin downtown. The room is being paid for by your joint credit card, which I assume you're aware of." Wade was indeed aware. He'd been monitoring every financial move his family made for the past week. Christina had been effectively cut off from her trust fund due to the irrevocable trust restructuring, but she still had access to emergency family credit cards. For now, "Marlene, please schedule a meeting with Christina for this afternoon. 2 o'clock. Conference room B." "Sir, should I inform her about the agenda?" "Tell her it's regarding her financial future. That should be sufficient motivation." After Marlene left, Wade turned to the wall of monitors displaying his various business interests. But his mind was on the bigger picture. Seth's arrest was satisfying but temporary. A good lawyer might get him out on bail, though the evidence Wade had provided would ensure conviction. Orlando's situation was more immediately dangerous, but that served Wade's purposes perfectly. The real work was just beginning. Wade opened a secure file on his computer containing detailed psychological profiles his investigator had compiled on each target. Seth was arrogant and overconfident, which made him predictable. Orlando was weak and desperate, which made him manipulable. Vicky was cunning but impatient, which made her prone to mistakes. Christina was the most complex. She had inherited Wade's intelligence and strategic thinking ability, but she'd been raised in privilege and had never faced real consequences. The wedding disaster would either teach her respect or drive her to escalate the conflict. Wade hoped for escalation. It would make the final lesson more profound. At precisely 2 p.m., Christina entered conference room B. She looked exhausted, her usual polished appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and dark circles under her eyes. She took the seat across from Wade without speaking. "You look tired," Wade observed. "Fuck you, Dad." Wade nodded thoughtfully. Vulgarity suggests emotional dysregulation. That's not strategically advantageous in negotiations. This isn't a negotiation. This is you destroying your own family because your feelings got hurt. Interesting perspective. From my viewpoint, you, your mother, and her boyfriend conspired to exclude me from your wedding while simultaneously attempting to manipulate me into transferring a $12 million asset. That suggests the destruction was already underway. Christina's composure cracked slightly. How did you know about Seth? Know about the secret planning? Know about the house keys demand being coordinated in advance? Wade pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. "I've been in business for 25 years, Christina. Corporate espionage, hostile takeovers, competitive intelligence. These are tools I use professionally. Did you think I wouldn't apply those same skills when my own family declared war on me?" Christina stared at the tablet displaying transcripts of recorded conversations between her, Vicky, and Seth. Her face went pale as she realized the scope of Wade's knowledge. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "Wrong question. The correct question is, what are you prepared to offer in exchange for my assistance with your current predicaments?" "What predicaments?" Wade smiled without warmth. "Orlando owes $2 million to people who express disappointment through physical violence. Seth is facing federal charges carrying a maximum sentence of 20 years. Your mother's assets are frozen due to money laundering suspicions. You're currently living on credit cards that I control and could cancel at any moment." Christina's hands clenched into fists. "You engineered all of this." "I simply ensure that existing problems came to light simultaneously. Orlando always had gambling debts. Seth was already committing securities fraud. Your mother was already siphoning household funds into secret accounts. I didn't create these problems. I just removed the concealment. So what's your offer?" Wade leaned back in his chair. "Complete transparency moving forward. Full disclosure of all financial activities. Public acknowledgement of your betrayal and a formal apology. Cessation of all contact with Seth Riley. An acceptance of whatever consequences I deem appropriate for your actions. And in exchange, I'll consider paying Orlando's debts. I might provide character references for Seth's sentencing hearing. I could potentially assist with your mother's legal difficulties." Christina stared at him for a long moment. "You've changed, Dad. The man I grew up with would never have done something like this. The man you grew up with was too busy working to pay attention to who his family really was. This is me paying attention." Christina stood up. "I need time to think. You have 24 hours. After that, my offers expire and you'll be managing these situations independently." As Christina reached the door, Wade spoke again. "Christina? The gambling creditors Orlando owes money to? They've expanded their interest to include anyone who might have influenced his financial decisions. That would include his new wife." Christina's hand froze on the doorknob. "Are you threatening me? I'm providing intelligence. What you do with that information is your choice." After she left, Wade returned to his office and placed a call to his head of security. "How are our guests at the Westin?" "Mrs. Stewart checked in 2 hours ago. Same floor as Christina, room directly across the hall." "Perfect. And our other friends?" "The gambling creditors have been provided with Orlando's current location. They're planning to visit him in protective custody." Wade hung up and walked to his window. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast. Perfect weather for what came next. Phase 2 was about to begin. Chapter 5. The Price of Betrayal. That evening, Wade sat in his study reading a first-edition copy of Sun Tzu's The Art of War when his secure phone buzzed. The message was from his surveillance team. Package delivered. All parties present. Wade set down the book and activated the monitors showing the Westin Hotel. Through carefully placed cameras, he could see Christina pacing in her room while Vicky sat on the bed, both women clearly arguing. Across the hall, Orlando remained barricaded in his own room, too terrified to leave after learning that his creditors had somehow discovered his location. The psychological pressure was working exactly as designed. At 9 p.m., Wade's landline rang. He let it ring 12 times before answering. Christina. Dad, we need to talk. All of us. Me, Mom, you. I'm listening. In person. Tonight. Please. Wade checked his watch. The Meridian Hotel. Presidential suite. 1 hour. He chose the Meridian deliberately. It was the crown jewel of his hotel empire, the property where he'd made his fortune, and the place where Vicky had once been proud to host charity events. Now it would serve as the venue for their final reckoning. Wade arrived first, as always. He'd learned long ago that controlling the environment gave you a significant advantage in any negotiation. The presidential suite was opulent but not ostentatious. Understated power, which was Wade's preferred aesthetic. Vicky arrived 10 minutes later, looking haggard and desperate. She'd aged 5 years in the past week. Christina followed 5 minutes after that, supporting Orlando, who looked like he hadn't slept since the wedding disaster. Thank you for coming, Wade said, gesturing to the seating area. Please sit. They arranged themselves on the opposite couch like defendants awaiting sentencing, which, Wade reflected, wasn't far from the truth. I believe Christina has a proposal, Wade continued. Christina looked at her mother, then at Orlando, then back at Wade. We want to make a deal. I'm listening. We'll give you what you want. Full disclosure, public apology, whatever. In exchange, you help us with the immediate problems. Wade nodded thoughtfully. That's a reasonable starting framework. However, I think we need to address the underlying issues that created this situation. What underlying issues? Vicky asked, speaking for the first time. Wade reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. This contains documentation of your affair with Seth Riley dating back 18 months. Bank records showing systematic theft of household funds. Communication records proving premeditated conspiracy to defraud me of property. And, most importantly, evidence of your long-term plan to eliminate me from the family structure entirely. He slid the folder across the coffee table. None of them moved to open it. The problem isn't the immediate crisis, Wade continued. The problem is that you've demonstrated complete contempt for me as a person while simultaneously attempting to rob me blind. The wedding exclusion was cruel. The property grab was criminal. But the systemic deception and planning required for both suggest this isn't impulsive behavior. It's who you are. Vicky finally spoke. Wade, I know how this looks, but how this looks. Vicky, you've been planning to replace me with your boyfriend while stealing my money to finance your new life. How exactly is this supposed to look? Orlando, who had been silent, suddenly broke down. Mr. Stewart, sir, I never wanted any of this. The gambling, the debts, the dangerous people. I just got in over my head, and Christina said her family would help in. Orlando, Wade interrupted gently. You're not the primary problem here. You're just collateral damage from poor choices. Christina leaned forward. Dad, what do you actually want from us? Wade stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 25 years ago, I was a broke construction worker who fell in love with a beautiful woman. I worked myself nearly to death building something substantial for our family. I missed dinners and birthdays and school plays because I was trying to create security and opportunities for the people I loved. He turned back to face them. I thought I was building a legacy. Instead, I was financing my own betrayal. Dad, Christina started. I want my investments back, Wade said quietly. Every penny I spent on private schools, college tuition, the house in Malibu, the cars, the vacations, the art gallery that loses money every month, the trust funds, all of it. I want it repaid with interest. The room fell silent. Vicky's face had gone white. Wade, that's impossible. We're talking about millions of dollars over 25 years. Approximately $8.7 million, Wade said precisely. I had my accountants calculate the exact figure. That doesn't include the opportunity cost of having the capital tied up in supporting ungrateful family members instead of reinvesting it in business growth. Christina stood up. You can't be serious. I'm entirely serious. You wanted independence from your pathetic father. Independence requires financial self-sufficiency. I'm simply helping you achieve your stated goal. Orlando was crying now. Sir, I can't pay back gambling debts and millions in family expenses. They'll kill me. Wade returned to his seat, which brings us to the alternative proposal. Alternative? Vicky asked. Complete asset forfeiture. I keep everything, the house, the cars, the trust funds, the art gallery, all of it. You start over with nothing but your own abilities. In exchange, I'll pay Orlando's gambling debts and provide each of you with $50,000 in starting capital. The silence stretched for 2 full minutes. And if we refuse both options? Christina asked. Wade smiled. Then you continue managing your current situation independently. Orlando deals with his creditors using his own resources. Vicky navigates her legal problems without my assistance. You figure out how to support yourself without access to family money. He stood up. You have until tomorrow at noon to decide. After that, all offers expire permanently. As they filed out of the suite, Vicky turned back. Wade, I know you're angry, but destroying your own family. I'm not destroying my family, Vicky. I'm simply stopping my subsidization of people who hate me. After they left, Wade poured himself a scotch and returned to the windows. The city sparkled below him, a testament to human ambition and achievement. He'd helped build portions of that skyline through his hotels and investments. Tomorrow would determine whether his family deserved to remain part of his legacy or whether that legacy would continue without them. Chapter 6, The Final Gambit. Wade didn't sleep that night. Instead, he worked. By dawn, he had restructured his entire estate, created new corporate entities, and prepared for every possible response his family might choose. His lawyers had drafted documents covering all contingencies. His security team had implemented additional surveillance protocols. His financial advisors had liquidated specific assets to ensure immediate cash availability. Whatever his family decided, Wade would be ready. At 10 a.m., Marlene brought him coffee and the morning briefings. Sir, there's been a development overnight. Oh. Orlando Dotson was found beaten unconscious in his hotel room. He's currently in the hospital. The police suspect his gambling creditors. Wade sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Condition? Stable, but he'll require surgery for internal injuries. The doctor said he was lucky. If the attack had been more severe, it could have been fatal. And the others? Mrs. Stewart and Christina spent the night at the hospital. They haven't returned to the hotel. Wade nodded. The escalation was proceeding exactly as he'd anticipated. Orlando's beating would clarify the stakes for everyone involved. This was no longer about family drama or hurt feelings. It was about immediate physical danger and long-term survival. At 11:45 a.m., Wade's secure phone rang. Christina, Dad, we need to meet. Now, I'll be in conference room B. No, neutral ground. The coffee shop in the hospital lobby. Interesting. They were thinking tactically now, choosing a public location where Wade couldn't control the environment. Christina was learning. Wade arrived at the hospital to find Christina and Vicky sitting at a corner table, both looking exhausted and traumatized. Orlando's beating had clearly shaken them more than Wade's financial warfare. How is he? Wade asked, taking the third chair. He'll live, Christina said. But they broke 3 ribs and ruptured his spleen. The doctor said if we hadn't found him when we did. I'm sorry that happened. Are you? Vicky asked bitterly. Or is this exactly what you wanted? Wade considered the question seriously. I wanted Orlando to understand the consequences of his choices. I didn't specifically want him beaten, but I'm not surprised it happened. Gambling debts to organized crime syndicates tend to be collected through escalating violence. You could have warned him, Christina said. I did warn him. I warned all of you. The difference is that Orlando's creditors express their displeasure through physical violence, while I express mine through financial and social consequences. Vicky leaned forward. Wade, we've made our decision. Which option? Neither, Christina said. We have a counter-proposal. Wade raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Christina pulled out a legal document. We give you an uncontested divorce. Vicky waives any claim to alimony or property division. I relinquish all rights to inheritance or family trusts. In exchange, you pay Orlando's gambling debts, and we all walk away from each other permanently. Wade read through the document carefully. It was well-crafted, clearly prepared by a competent attorney. They were offering him everything he legally owned in exchange for approximately $2 million and permanent separation from his family. This is interesting, Wade said finally, but it doesn't address the fundamental issue, which is accountability. Under this proposal, you escape consequences for your actions by paying me to make your problems disappear. That's not justice. That's privilege. Vicky's voice rose slightly. Wade, our marriage has been over for years. We both know that. And Christina deserves the chance to build her own life without this family dysfunction. Our marriage has been over since you started sleeping with Seth Riley. Wade agreed. But the destruction of our relationship doesn't absolve you of responsibility for theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Christina slammed her hand on the table. What do you want from us? Blood. Wade looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She was intelligent, beautiful, and completely unprepared for a world where actions had permanent consequences. In that moment, he realized the depth of his failure as a father. He'd given her everything except the tools to handle adversity. I want you to understand something, Christina. The world outside our family bubble doesn't forgive betrayal because you're sorry. It doesn't ignore theft because you're desperate. The criminals who beat Orlando don't care about his intentions or his circumstances. They care about results. So teach us, Christina said quietly. Instead of destroying us, teach us how to fix this. Wade sat back in his chair. This was the first time anyone in his family had asked him for guidance instead of demanding his resources. You want to learn? Yes. Wade looked at Vicky. All of you. Vicky hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Wade pulled out his phone and made a call. Marlene, cancel my afternoon meetings and transfer $2 million to Orlando Dotson's creditors immediately. Use the emergency accounts. He hung up and looked at his family. The gambling debts are paid. Orlando is safe. Now we start your education. What kind of education? Vicky asked. You're going to learn how to rebuild your lives without my money, my connections, or my protection. You're going to understand what it means to earn everything you have through your own efforts. Wade stood up. You have 1 year. No financial assistance, no family resources, no safety net. At the end of that year, if you've demonstrated genuine growth and accountability, we'll discuss the possibility of rebuilding our relationships. And if we can't do it, Christina asked, then you'll have learned the most important lesson I can teach you, that actions have permanent consequences and some betrayals cannot be undone. Wade walked away, leaving his family sitting in the hospital coffee shop. For the first time in months, he felt something other than anger. He felt hope. Chapter 7, The Wedding Gift. 6 months later, Wade sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports when Marlene knocked and entered with an unusual expression, something between concern and amusement. Sir, you have visitors. I'm not expecting anyone. It's your family, sir. All of them. They're requesting a meeting. Wade looked up from his papers. He'd had minimal contact with Christina, Vicky, and Orlando since their hospital conversation. His private investigators provided monthly reports on their progress, but he deliberately maintained distance to ensure their learning experience remained authentic. Conference Room B. Give me 5 minutes. Wade gathered his thoughts as he walked to the meeting. According to his reports, the past 6 months had been transformative for all 3 of them. Christina had taken a job as a junior marketing coordinator at a small nonprofit, earning a fraction of what she'd received from her trust fund. Vicky had been forced to close her art gallery and was now working as a real estate assistant. Orlando, after recovering from his injuries, had enrolled in community college and was working nights at a warehouse. More importantly, they'd been living together in a modest two-bedroom apartment, sharing expenses and responsibilities for the first time in their lives. Wade entered the conference room to find them sitting together on one side of the table. They looked different, leaner, more focused, wearing clothes that were practical rather than designer. Christina's manicured nails were now short and unpolished. Vicky's expensive jewelry was gone. Orlando had the calloused hands of someone doing physical labor. "Thank you for seeing us," Christina said. Wade took his seat across from them. "You're welcome. You look well. We wanted to give you something," Vicky said, sliding a check across the table. Wade looked at the amount, $47,000. "What's this?" "Partial repayment," Orlando said. "It's every penny we've managed to save over the past 6 months. We know it's not much compared to what we owe you, but it's a start." Wade studied the check. Based on their reported earnings, this represented nearly every dollar they'd made after basic living expenses. This must have required significant sacrifice. "It did," Christina admitted. "But we learned something important. When you're spending your own money instead of someone else's, you make very different choices." "Such as?" Vicky answered. "Such as realizing that we never actually needed most of the things we thought were essential. The expensive restaurants, the designer clothes, the luxury cars, they were just props for an identity we thought we were supposed to have." Wade folded the check and put it in his pocket. "What else have you learned?" Orlando spoke up. "I learned that my gambling addiction wasn't about the money. It was about avoiding responsibility for my own life. When you're living on trust funds and family money, it's easy to believe that your choices don't really matter because someone else will always fix your problems. And when that's not true, then you realize that every choice has a cost, and you're the one who has to pay it." Wade turned to Christina. "What about you?" "I learned that you weren't absent from my life because you didn't care. You were absent because you were building something for us to inherit. But inheritance without understanding its value is just privilege. And privilege without responsibility is just corruption." Wade felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of anger he'd carried for months. "I learned something else," Christina continued. "I learned that the man who built a billion-dollar empire from nothing isn't someone you betray lightly. The consequences will be proportional to the offense." Wade smiled slightly. "Go on. The wedding gift you left us wasn't destruction, it was education. You forced us to face the real world without our safety net. You made us understand what we'd been taking for granted." Vicky leaned forward. "Wade, we know we can't undo what we did, but we wanted you to know that we understand now why it was so devastating. We didn't just betray your trust. We demonstrated that we had no appreciation for everything you'd sacrificed to provide for us." Wade stood and walked to the window. The city below bustled with activity, millions of people working, building, striving to create something meaningful with their lives. "The check is appreciated," he said without turning around. "But money isn't what this was about." "What was it about?" Christina asked. Wade turned back to face them. "Respect, understanding, recognition that the life you were living came from someone else's sacrifice and dedication." "We understand that now," Orlando said quietly. Wade returned to his seat. "I have a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "You continue living independently for another 6 months. No financial assistance from me. But during that time, you work part-time for various divisions of Stewart Industries. Christina in marketing, Vicky in property management, Orlando in logistics." "What would be the purpose?" Vicky asked. "To learn how the family business actually operates. To understand what it takes to build and maintain something substantial. To see if you have the capability and dedication to be part of it moving forward." Christina's eyes brightened. "And after 6 months? We reevaluate. If you've demonstrated genuine competence and commitment, we discuss your potential role in the family business. If not, you continue your independent lives with my respect, but without my involvement." The three of them exchanged glances. "What about your personal relationships with us?" Vicky asked. "The divorce, the family dynamics?" Wade considered this carefully. "One thing at a time. Professional competence first. Personal relationships will depend on what we build from there." Orlando cleared his throat. "Sir, there's something else we need to tell you. What's that? Christina answered. Seth contacted us last month. He's out on bail pending trial, and he wanted us to testify on his behalf. Said we could present his relationship with Mom as a marriage of convenience that went wrong rather than fraud. Wade's expression didn't change. And we told him to go to hell, Vicky said firmly. What he did to you, what he convinced us to do to you, it was wrong. We're not going to compound it by lying in court. We're prepared to testify for the prosecution if needed, Christina added, to provide the full context of his manipulation and fraud. Wade felt the last vestiges of his anger finally release. These weren't the same people who had betrayed him 6 months ago. They'd been fundamentally changed by the consequences of their actions. The prosecution already has sufficient evidence, Wade said. Your testimony won't be necessary, but I appreciate your willingness to provide it. Wade stood up. I'll have Marlene coordinate your work assignments. You'll start Monday. As they prepared to leave, Christina turned back. Dad, thank you. For what? For caring enough to teach us instead of just destroying us. It would have been easier to just write us off. Wade looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She'd lost the entitled arrogance that had defined her for years. In its place was something harder but more valuable, earned wisdom. Destroying you would have been a waste of potential, Wade said. Teaching you was an investment in your future. After they left, Wade returned to his office and called his head of security. Protocol 7 is complete. Discontinue all surveillance and return to standard security protocols. He hung up and walked to his safe, removing the photograph of 7-year-old Christina at Disneyland. For the first time in months, he could look at it without feeling pain. The wedding gift he'd given them, the gift of consequences, had finally produced the result he'd hoped for. His family was worth saving after all. Chapter 8. Rebuilding Trust. 9 months after starting their probationary employment, Wade's family had exceeded every expectation. Christina had revolutionized the marketing approach for 3 hotel properties, increasing booking rates by 23%. Vicky had streamlined property management operations, reducing costs while improving tenant satisfaction. Orlando had identified inefficiencies in the logistics chain that saved the company over $300,000 annually. More importantly, they'd done it all while continuing to live independently, refusing any special treatment or family privileges. Wade was reviewing their performance reports when Marlene entered with an unusual visitor request. Sir, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's regarding Seth Riley. Send him in. The man who entered was tall, thin, and carried himself with the careful precision of a federal prosecutor. He introduced himself as Agent Felipe Powell from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Mr. Stewart, thank you for seeing me. I wanted to update you on the Riley case. Wade gestured to a chair. Please sit. How can I help you? Seth Riley pled guilty to securities fraud last week. He's been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to his victims. That's appropriate. Agent Powell studied Wade carefully. Mr. Stewart, your family's cooperation was instrumental in building our case. The evidence they provided about Riley's manipulation and fraud was compelling. Wade raised an eyebrow. My family cooperated with your investigation? Yes, sir. Your wife, daughter, and son-in-law provided detailed testimony about how Riley convinced them to participate in his schemes. They were completely forthcoming about their own involvement and eager to help us understand the full scope of his criminal activity. This was news to Wade. His family had never mentioned cooperating with the SEC investigation. I see. There's something else, Agent Powell continued. During our investigation, we uncovered evidence that Riley was planning something much more serious than securities fraud, such as he'd taken out a substantial life insurance policy on you, Mr. Stewart. $5 million, with your wife as the beneficiary. The policy was purchased just 2 weeks before your daughter's wedding. Wade felt a chill run down his spine. Are you suggesting? We're suggesting that Riley's plans went beyond excluding you from family events. The life insurance policy, combined with his accelerating financial crimes and your wife's planned inheritance, suggests a more permanent solution to what he saw as the Wade problem. Wade sat back in his chair. Do you have evidence of actual planning? We found preliminary research on various accident scenarios in his computer files. Nothing specific enough to charge him with conspiracy to commit murder, but enough to suggest he was exploring options. Agent Powell leaned forward. Mr. Stewart, your family's decision to cut ties with Riley and cooperate with our investigation may have saved your life. After Agent Powell left, Wade sat alone in his office, processing this information. His family's betrayal had been devastating, but hadn't been murderous. Seth Riley, however, had apparently been planning something far more sinister. That evening, Wade called Christina and asked her to bring Vicky and Orlando to dinner at his house, the first time he'd invited them to the family home since the wedding disaster. They arrived nervous and uncertain, unsure why Wade had suddenly requested this meeting. Wade served a simple meal he'd prepared himself, something he'd learned to do during his months of solitude. As they ate, he shared what Agent Powell had told him. The reaction was immediate and horrified. "Oh my God," Vicky whispered. "Wade, I had no idea. I thought the life insurance was just financial planning. When did you first suspect Seth's intentions went beyond fraud?" Wade asked. Christina answered. "About 3 months ago, when we were working with the SEC, they asked us about some research files on Seth's computer. They wouldn't tell us what was in them, but the way they asked the questions. We realized we might have been accessories to something much worse than we understood," Orlando added. "That's when we decided to tell them everything, regardless of how it made us look." Wade studied their faces. The horror and guilt were genuine. They hadn't known about Seth's murderous intentions, but they clearly felt responsible for enabling him to get close enough to attempt them. "There's something I need to tell you," Wade said quietly. "I've been watching your work performance over the past 9 months. All of you have exceeded expectations significantly." "Thank you," Christina said uncertainly. "But more than that, you've demonstrated something I wasn't sure you possessed: moral courage. Cooperating with the SEC investigation, knowing it would expose your own involvement in Seth's schemes, took integrity." Wade stood and walked to his safe. He returned with 3 envelopes. "These are offers for permanent positions within Stewart Industries. Christina, Vice President of Marketing. Vicky, Director of Property Operations. Orlando, Regional Logistics Manager." Their faces showed shock and cautious hope. "The salaries are competitive, but not excessive," Wade continued. "You'll be expected to maintain the same performance standards you've demonstrated over the past 9 months. And your personal relationships with me will remain separate from your professional responsibilities." Vicky opened her envelope and stared at the contract. "Wade, this is incredibly generous, but what about us? Our marriage, our family." Wade sat back down. "I filed for divorce, as you know. That will proceed as planned. Our marriage was damaged beyond repair by the betrayal and deception." Vicky nodded sadly. "I understand. However," Wade continued, "that doesn't mean we can't rebuild a different kind of relationship. Professional respect can sometimes evolve into personal friendship, given time and demonstrated trustworthiness." Christina looked up from her contract. "And what about Seth? The life insurance policy, the planning, does that change how you view what happened?" Wade considered this carefully. "Seth's criminal intentions don't absolve you of your choices. You still chose to exclude me from the wedding, still participated in schemes to manipulate my property, still demonstrated a fundamental lack of respect for my role in your lives." "But," Orlando prompted, "but it does provide context that suggests your actions were influenced by someone with genuinely malicious intent. You were manipulated by an expert manipulator who was planning far worse than you realized." Wade reached across the table and picked up the check they'd given him months earlier. "I never cashed this." He tore it in half. "Consider it a wedding gift. The education I provided was worth far more than $47,000. As the evening progressed, they talked about the future, their roles in the company, their living situations, the slow process of rebuilding trust. It wasn't the family reunion Wade had once imagined, but it was something perhaps more valuable, a foundation for honest relationships built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. When they prepared to leave, Christina hugged him, the first physical contact they'd had in over a year. "Dad, I know things can't go back to the way they were. But thank you for giving us the chance to become people worth respecting. Wade watched them drive away, then returned to his study. The photograph of 7-year-old Christina was back on his desk, but now it was joined by new photos, images of the capable, responsible adults his family had become through adversity. The wedding gift that had started as revenge had ultimately become redemption. Chapter 9. The Legacy Rebuilt. 2 years later, Wade stood on the terrace of his Malibu mansion watching Christina direct the setup for a company barbecue. It wasn't a family gathering. It was a corporate event for Stewart Industries' top performers. But watching his daughter efficiently coordinate logistics while building genuine relationships with her colleagues filled him with a pride he'd never felt during her privileged years. Vicky approached from the house, carrying a platter of food. Her role as director of property operations had evolved into something resembling a chief operating officer position, and her business acumen had surprised everyone, including Wade himself. "The Hong Kong team just confirmed," she said. "They'll be video conferencing in for the presentation at 4. Wade nodded. "Orlando's logistics projections for the Asian expansion? Comprehensive and conservative. He's learned to underpromise and overdeliver." Orlando had indeed transformed dramatically. His experience with gambling addiction had given him unique insights into risk management that proved invaluable in business planning. He'd also married Christina in a simple courthouse ceremony, a genuine celebration that Wade had been honored to attend. "Sir." Marlene approached with a tablet. "The sole property acquisition just closed. Mr. Dodson's shipping projections were accurate to within 2%. Wade smiled. Orlando's insistence on being called Mr. Dodson in professional settings had been his own decision, a way of establishing credibility independent of family connections. And the quarterly numbers? Stewart Industries had the most profitable quarter in company history. The family divisions contributed significantly to that success. Wade looked around at the gathering. His employees, including his former family, were engaged, productive, and genuinely committed to excellence. This was what he'd always envisioned building, a legacy organization that created value through competence and dedication. Christina appeared at his elbow. "Dad, there's someone here to see you." Wade turned to see a familiar figure approaching. Agent Felipe Powell, now retired from the SEC. "Agent Powell, this is unexpected. Mr. Stewart, I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I was in the area and wanted to update you on Seth Riley." "Of course. What's his status?" "He was killed in federal prison 3 months ago, stabbed by another inmate during a dispute over gambling debts." Wade absorbed this information without emotion. "I see. There's something else. Before he died, Riley confessed to planning your murder. He'd hired someone to arrange what would look like an accident during one of your business trips. The plan was to collect the insurance money and disappear with your wife." Vicky, who had overheard, went pale. "Felipe, I had no idea." "We know, Mrs. Henderson." Vicky had reverted to her maiden name after the divorce. "Our investigation confirmed that Riley never shared his ultimate intentions with any of you." Agent Powell turned back to Wade. "I wanted you to know that your instincts about the danger were correct. The surveillance and security measures you implemented likely saved your life." After Powell left, Wade found himself alone on the terrace with his former family. The weight of what they'd unknowingly participated in hung heavy in the air. "Wade," Vicky said quietly, "how can you stand to be around us? Knowing that our actions brought someone into your life who wanted to kill you." Wade considered the question carefully. "Because you didn't know his true intentions. Because when you discovered the scope of his criminality, you chose to expose it rather than protect yourselves. Because you've spent 2 years proving that you learned from the experience." Orlando spoke up. "But we still enabled him. We still made the choices that put you in danger." "Yes, you did. And you've paid the consequences for those choices. But holding on to anger about past mistakes prevents growth. The people you've become are more valuable than the punishment you might deserve for who you used to be." Christina joined the conversation. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you just cut us off completely. Easier for you, probably." Wade shook his head. "Easier, yes. But wasteful. You had potential that just needed to be properly developed. Destroying potential is always a mistake, even when it's justified." That evening, After the company barbecue ended and the employees had gone home, Wade sat in his study reviewing the day's events. His secure phone buzzed with a message from his head of security. Perimeter secure. All family members departed safely. Wade smiled at the terminology. Even his security team had begun referring to Christina, Vicky, and Orlando as family members again, though their relationship with Wade was now primarily professional. He opened his laptop and began typing his annual letter to the board of directors. This year's theme was legacy and leadership, building sustainable success through human development. As he wrote, Wade reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 2 years. The wedding that never happened had indeed been a gift, not just to his family, but to him as well. It had forced him to confront the difference between providing for people and developing them, between financial generosity and emotional investment. His phone rang. Christina, Dad, I wanted to thank you for hosting today. The team really appreciated seeing the Malibu property. It was my pleasure. Your presentation on the European marketing strategy was impressive. I learned from the best. A pause. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret how things turned out? The divorce, the separation, the way our relationship changed. Wade considered this. I regret the pain that was necessary to create growth, but I don't regret the growth itself. We have something now that we never had when we were a traditional family. What's that? Mutual respect, earned rather than assumed. After hanging up, Wade returned to his letter. The final paragraph read, True legacy is not measured by what we leave to our successors, but by what we teach them to build for themselves. The greatest gift we can give the next generation is not wealth, but the wisdom and capability to create their own. Wade printed the letter, then walked out onto the terrace one final time. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before him, dark and powerful under the moonlight. Somewhere out there, ships were carrying goods managed by Orlando's logistics systems to hotels marketed by Christina's campaigns and maintained by Vicky's operational excellence. The empire he'd built was no longer just his. It was theirs as well, earned through competence rather than inheritance. The wedding gift he'd given them had ultimately become the greatest gift they'd given him, a family worth respecting. Wade Stewart had finally built the legacy he'd always envisioned, not through blood or money, but through the transformation of potential into achievement. The revenge that had begun in anger had ended in redemption. And that, Wade reflected, was the most perfect victory of all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.